webinar, Proving Sustainable Business is Good Business. My name is Peter Fadul, and I lead the Sustainability and Circular Economy program at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. The U.S. Chamber Foundation is dedicated to helping businesses do well by doing good through our original research, content, and events such as this. So we're honored to co-host today's programming with our esteemed colleagues from NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business and Cargill, who I'll introduce in just a moment here. Just a reminder that this program is being recorded for distribution after the event. So quantifying the business impact of sustainability efforts has long been a unique challenge for the private sector. Yet when companies are able to tangibly prove that sustainable business is good business, it can lead to increased momentum and top-down support behind their environmental programs. So our partners at NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business have made tremendous strides towards developing a framework to accomplish this with their Return on Sustainability Investment Methodology, or ROSI, and would like to share their findings with those here today. We're also joined by a real-world implementer of their methodology in Cargill, and together they'll be able to shed light on how you can bring these learnings to your own company or organization. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague Sophie Rifkin, who's the Director of Corporate Research and Engagement at NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business, and Ty Ullman, Sustainability Leader at Cargill. Sophie, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much for your partnership in bringing this program together today. I'm really pleased to be joined by my colleague and our partner in our ROSI work, Ty. Thanks to all of you for joining us today for what I hope will be an engaging presentation. How the webinar will work today is I will present for roughly 20 minutes or so. Ty will present about Cargill and their work on ROSI for roughly 20 minutes or so, and then we will leave time at the end for questions and discussion. Throughout, please use the Q&A function located at the bottom of your Zoom to pose questions. We will not be using chat for that, but please feel free to pose questions in the Q&A. So without further ado, let me pull up my slides and start talking about our ROSI work. Great. So just quickly, a little bit of background about the NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business. Our center is 5 years old. We were founded by Tanzi Whalen, who ran Rainforest Alliance for 15 years prior to starting a center at Stern, really focused on how can we better educate current and future business leaders to understand how to prove the value of sustainability and to really prepare them to lead in an increasingly resource-constrained and globally complex world. And we do this through education, research, outreach and thought leadership, and career development work for students as well. We'll be spending most of our time today talking about the ROSI methodology. But just to say that really the proving the business case for sustainability through ROSI is really a core component of our thought leadership at Stern. We also do cutting edge research on other topics, such as our Sustainable Market Share Index, which tracks the performance of sustainably marketed products, finding that they're responsible for more than half the growth in CPG, and that this growth has really continued despite the COVID-19 pandemic. We're also in the middle of work looking at exploring whether investing in the improvement of quality employment is beneficial for corporate performance. And we have a really unique program and research partnership looking at how can we bring the SDGs, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and identify opportunities at the local level, particularly in New York City, but hoping to create a framework for investment and spurring action on SDGs for other cities as well. We have a lot of great educational programs for undergrads, graduates, and professionals as well. And our executive programs are certainly maybe of interest for those listening today, ranging from bespoke custom programs as well as online certificates as well. Okay, so enough about the center, and let me turn now to talk a little bit more about our return on sustainability investment methodology. So if you're tuning in today, You likely all believe or know that sustainability can and does create financial value, but the challenge is how to track it and how to monetize it. We know that there are numerous studies that find a positive correlation between corporate performance on material ESG issues and corporate financial performance. But we know that at the individual corporation level, at the level sort of internal to the business itself, that companies are not always tracking the financial return of those sustainability strategies. This just means that in our view, that both corporate and ultimately investor decision-making is weakened by the lack of that relevant financial information. But the challenge is, how do you measure it? And this is really the backdrop on which we set out to create a methodology to help companies be able to better monetize their investments in sustainability. So some of the reasons that we've found of why companies and investors are not monetizing their return, and certainly those listening may have experienced others. Some of it is around availability and quality of ESG data. We see that there are many different sustainability strategies, and that strategy and execution often sit within different units, making it difficult to talk to each other. That connects to the fourth bullet, that if financial benefits are tracked differently, if at all, by different units, and aren't always well aggregated. Some of the benefits, as Ty may talk about later, are intangible and potentially difficult to measure. It doesn't mean that you can't measure them. It just makes it a little bit trickier. We definitely see increased engagement from the finance function in companies around this work, but I think historically and into the future a bit as well, it's not always clear to the finance function that there is a significant benefit that would justify tracking ROSI. And finally, it can be difficult to wrap your head around looking at things like avoided risk, sometimes a trickier thing to think about monetizing. So we've worked with a number of different companies cross-industry through our ROSI projects. And really here, this is the kind of logic flow of ROSI. It's really predicated that when a company embeds sustainability and really is integrating it into its strategy and practice, it can improve these internal benefits to the company. ROSI is really about measuring internalities. That is, how does an investment in sustainability help a company perhaps improve customer loyalty or increase employee retention, recruitment, productivity? How might it help to reduce and mitigate against different risks, supply risk, regulatory risk, reputational risk, for example? On the upside, how might it help to boost sales and marketing? How does investing in a sustainable sourcing program help to strengthen and improve supplier relations? And might that result in more stable, higher quality supply of a key product? And how does this work help to strengthen and improve stakeholder relationships? So this is really the lens through which we approach a ROSI project and are in turn trying to determine where the benefits exist. What is a company changing about how they conduct business? What does that change look like? What are the benefits from that change? And how might you ascribe a financial value to that? So this is generally how we approach a ROSI project. We're really focusing in, I would just highlight number 2. It's about talking about things at a practice level. How does a company support of a new sustainable packaging initiative? That might be a practice. How does putting solar panels on a manufacturing facility? That might be a practice. How does increasing paid time off or flexible work schedule? That might be a practice. In essence, what are companies doing? They've set strategies, you've set goals and commitments, but how are you actually operationalizing this work? And that's really where we're exploring and understanding where the financial value is accruing back to the company as a result of it. So a couple of examples, we might see that climate change emission reductions may improve a company's energy management, which leads to reduced energy costs. That's a very straightforward one. The second one, a little less obvious. You might look at water conservation practices in a factory in a water-prone or water-stressed area. Maybe you might look at a simple ROI and say, well, I'm not meeting my internal rate of return by investing in these efficiency measures. But when you start to look at a more holistic set of benefits, for example, does your factory need to be shut down X times a year because you don't have enough water to run your facility? what are the tangible financial impacts of that type of shutdown, and how might you start to weave that type of benefit into your fuller and more complete business case. You might see improvements in employee productivity and higher retention, that's lowering hiring costs, and how does sourcing practices maybe lead to more resiliency and stability in a supplier relationship as well. Overall, we think that ROSI can help companies improve decision-making processes and can help to figure out both in the future where to invest dollars, or looking backwards, what has been the ROI of a particular strategic implementation. And this all can inform better investor making decision as well, to understand where value is being created. So I'll walk through at a high level a couple key case studies, but again, really excited to have Ty on to talk about some ongoing work that we're doing to support her as well. So our first ROSI project really looked at the value of companies that are committing to deforestation-free supply chain commitments, specifically around beef in Brazil. And so I'm not going to walk through all of the benefits that we uncovered, but working across the value chain, ranchers, slaughterhouses, retailers, what we found is that a number of different benefits are accruing. So two that I'll highlight is the first is that when you pursue a chain of custody-based supply chain where a product has to be tracked at every step of the process, you really find that less product falls off the truck, if you will, meaning you're increasing the stability and able to ensure that all of your product is flowing from the ranch and the slaughterhouse to the retailer. And there's a real financial value that can be generated from that. We also found that at the retail level, the agricultural practices implemented as a result of deforestation-free supply chain commitments were also yielding a higher quality beef at the end of the day. So it wasn't just about a price premium connected to sustainability, it was also one notably around the quality of the beef as well. So just two quick examples. There's more on this on our website if you'd like to read further, but just to say, I hope a snapshot of how we think about a more holistic set of benefits feeding into a business case. We also have done work with Mars and an accompanying template tool, Excel-based monetization tool from this work is available on our site as well, that was looking at the benefits of Mars for their livelihoods fund for family farming. They wanted to use this analysis to help spur additional investments from value chain partners through the program that helps to improve farmer incomes and enable safe working conditions in their regions of operation. And so benefits we uncovered of the existence of having the L3F program include things like longer term contracts, more sustainable products, reduced reputational market and regulatory risk as well. We recently completed a large body of work with the apparel industry, and working with a couple partners in that, uncovered the value that REI, the North American outdoor retailer, the value of them being a purpose-oriented and sustainably aligned company was driving in terms of different financial outputs as well. In essence, attempting to take something rather qualitative and squishy like purpose and translate it into a financial or HR benefit. I think another key value of this case articulated was the way that it brought together their sustainability team and their HR team and their finance team. So it's enabling different internal functions to speak to each other and to share information. Benefits that we found here included things like a reduction in turnover and associated hiring costs, and increases in productivity among their high performers. We did this analysis using REI's actual employee engagement survey data to be able to use statistical analysis to say that there was something unique about the company culture and the way that it was impacting these HR and employee related outcomes as well. We've subtracted mission aligned days off that REI offers to get to a net benefit in just 1 year of $34 billion, which for REI is roughly 5% of payroll expenses. Similarly, in our apparel work on a completely different topic, we work with Eileen Fisher to understand the value of their circularity program. So the brand has had a very successful circular take-back program called the Renew line, where consumers can bring back gently worn Eileen Fisher garments. Eileen Fisher repairs, mends, cleans, and then sells them in a standalone business called Renew. but we wanted to understand both some more straightforward benefits, but also some less straightforward ones to really understand what's the value of this program and how is it deriving value back to Eileen Fisher. And so we looked at things like profit from the Renew program, incremental profit to Eileen Fisher. But then the one I'd highlight is this customer acquisition cost reduction. All brands are trying to figure out how to bring new customers into the door, right? And so with this, it was really understanding what value does circularity play and maybe helping a brand like Eileen Fisher to attract a different type of demographic. And so we found that customers maybe became a Renew customer and then became an Eileen Fisher customer. So a way of thinking about how your marketing costs might be different if you're able to promote or really kind of stand up a circularity program as well. We also monetize the benefits and increases in earned media and the press that they got as a result of this program. For them, just in 1 year, a total net benefit of $1.8 million as well. I'll articulate again that the process and the creating of the templates and finding where the data exists and bringing different people from parts of the business together is a really valuable part of the ROSI process, just as much so as getting to the actual monetization output. And then the last one that I'll highlight is from an industry collaboration that we did as one of our first ROSI projects in the automotive industry. We worked with a set of auto companies to really both first map the material issues that the companies are exploring and understand those key practices as well. So some of the high level findings, we found that proactively investing and reducing recalls, the financial benefit of doing that was more than $550 million. So when you look at all of the different costs of a recall, includes a more holistic set of costs from things like legal PR, expenses for quality control and redesigned parts, in addition to, yes, the cost of repair per vehicle, you're able to figure out a way that maybe the business case does make sense for a company to be more proactive around reducing recalls. We also looked at benefits around waste management and that prioritizing waste management strategies can yield significant financial value as too, and that advances in circularity can pay as well, and that there's an upside as well as a risk management perspective too. So the last section before I turn it to Ty is just to talk a little bit about, I mentioned we work one-on-one with companies on ROSI and got some really great case studies out of this. We also have done these industry-wide collaborations. So our one this year, work with the apparel industry, lots of great resources on our site for any on the call in the apparel industry. Certainly welcome interest for those who'd like to learn more and to learn more about the different tools and resources we've developed from this industry collaboration. Similarly with the automotive, what I just referenced at a high level, a lot of great resources for those in the automotive industry, to learn more about the different strategies that we've identified as well. And then to stay on the food and agriculture, this is our focus for the 2021 year. We're embarking now to do what we've done in apparel and automotive for food and agriculture. And that's certainly, a lot of the work that we've been doing with Cargill will be feeding into this now industry-wide focus that we have. So you can just see at a high level some of the strategies we're starting to explore, and definitely interested from an academic perspective to hear feedback and thoughts on how we think about this work moving forward. So for those listening, if you want to learn more, there's lots of ways to collaborate with ROSI in our industry-wide projects or one-on-one. Certainly seek opportunities to collaborate on research, case study development as well. And then lastly, student education collaborations too. There's great opportunities to get smart Stern students working in your organizations or on projects as well. And we look forward to also just supporting students as they think about their careers in sustainability. So with that, Ty, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk through the work that we've been collaborating on. And thank you so much again for joining us today, Ty.
Great. Thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk about some of the work we've been doing together. It's been an exciting project for us. So I'm excited to share some of the initial findings and what we've been working on. So I'll start just a little background on Cargill. If you haven't heard of us, you can see our vision here on the slide and some statistics around our size and scale in which we operate. And so we've been around for about 155 years, operating in over 100 countries with offices in around 70. And on the next slide, it shows a little bit more around Cargill's business model and where we operate. And so there's kind of three main buckets that we work, really looking at connecting farmers and agriculture to our customers. And that falls into insights through our partnership work, either around data analytics, market expertise, risk management, or financial solutions, as well as the physical products that I think we're most well known for, really focused on animal nutrition, our food ingredients business, animal protein, branded foods, and bioindustrials. And then the third piece of that stool is really just around moving products around the world and delivering those goods to our customers globally. And so with that in mind, on the next slide, all of that work, even though we're a huge global company, all aligns under this purpose umbrella. And so we strive to be the leader in nourishing the world in a safe, responsible, and a sustainable way. And that's really the North Star and our guidepost for how we operate our business, but also around how we make commitments. And so on the next slide, it shows the spectrum of sustainability commitments that we have made. And I won't go through all of these, but I think it's important to highlight a couple so you understand why we settled on two of the supply chains and the work that we applied the ROSI model to. And so if you start on the right-hand side of the slide, we have made context-based water commitments, really looking at our priority watersheds to achieving sustainable water management. And it sounds very general, and it's because water is such a context-based issue. And so within that goal, we have very specific targets, either around water quality in certain regions that we source from, or water use in water risk areas where we have facilities, or water access in communities where that is a big challenge. And so that's a key piece of our commitment and some of the strategies that we have in sustainability. The other two I really want to highlight is around land use. So we have a commitment to be deforestation free by 2030, as well as our climate change commitment. And so we have set science-based target commitments to reduce our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 10% by 2025, and then another 30% intensity reduction in our scope 3, so upstream and downstream in our supply chains by 2030. And all of that is against a 2017 baseline. So with those three commitments in mind, there's obviously a lot more and tons of detail behind the commitments that we've made. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them in our Q&A section about the commitments Cargill has made, and our website has a lot more details there. But I think it's important to keep those in mind, because on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about the project itself and what we worked on. And so when we think about those commitments, two key supply chains for us are around palm and soy sustainability. And so we really just focused on the North America market, knowing that we're a large global company, right? And there'll be other regions that have their specific regional differences. But if we just think about North America and this market and where our supply chains then flow into, for palm sustainability, we're really looking at our commitment around no deforestation, no development on peat, which supports our climate commitment, and then no exploitation. And within that commitment, we have 5-year action plans that we implement. And so those are the specific strategies that the ROSI model looked at and applied the methodology against. And so I listed the 3 big buckets here, but it's really around transparency, right? Understanding what your supply chain looks like, supplier engagement, which includes working with our suppliers, direct and indirect, our work in plantations, landscape programs, our programs around smallholder farmers, but all of that big bucket around supplier engagement to drive progress. And then the last piece is really around verification, right? So monitoring and having a grievance process and just really making sure that our commitment and our action plan are delivering against the commitments that I highlighted earlier. On the soy side, it's much more focused on our greenhouse gas and water commitments. And so if we think about soy in North America, we're really looking at our soil health and regenerative agriculture work. And so we have an additional commitment in regenerative agriculture to drive adoption of different conservation practices that benefit soil health and fall under that regenerative ag umbrella across 10 million acres in North America. And so looking at that, that's a way for us to be able to reduce our carbon footprint and potentially sequester carbon into the soil, as well as better protect our water quality and improve water quantity as well. And so we looked at a suite of conservation practices there to help us meet those commitments. And so with this project, there are tons of different sustainability strategies that we could really look at, but we really focus to what's happening within our supply chain. And so think of what's happening on the farm level or with our different suppliers throughout the supply chain, and less focus on our plants and operations. We have lots of good work that's happening in that space, but if you think about where the majority of our impact is happening, it's upstream in our supply chain. And so by applying that model, we were able to identify 10 to 11 benefits that we were able to quantify and model per supply chain. So with that background, if you want to move to the next slide, I just want to talk through some of the key benefits that we saw in applying this model to both our palm and soy supply chains. So I think the first one that was so important to us is really around having this disciplined and comprehensive approach to really building the business case for sustainability. So like Sophie mentioned, I think inherently we all know and believe that by being more sustainable, we're improving the business, but we don't always have the most disciplined and comprehensive approach to being able to measure that. And what we've been really good at is we all understand where our sustainability risks are, right? We understand the impact that we have and what we need to solve for. We also have a really good understanding of our costs, right? And what it's going to take to get there. And that value piece and the benefit piece is where we often have a really hard time quantifying. And so by working through the ROSI model and in partnership with NYU, they were able to help us design very tangible and specific metrics that are based on the benefits assessment and interviews that they conducted using a suite of methods. And that's really important because it creates a much more comprehensive analysis of those benefits that helps us be able to model and analyze them very easily. And so like Sophie mentioned, it helps us work through a lot of our internal silos and different divisions within the business. And so a good example of that is in soy. There are benefits that can happen in our soy origination team versus what happens on the soy processing side. And those are very separate teams that have different accounting systems, right? And are measuring value very differently. And so by using this approach, NYU and the ROSI model was able to bring all those together to give us a much more comprehensive picture of how this is benefiting Cargill as a whole. The other piece of that disciplined approach that's really important to us is that there are a lot of benefits that we think are happening or we intuitively know are happening, but are really difficult to quantify. And the ROSI model's approach and the expertise and research that they had really helped us be able to build a better metric in that space so that we can start to understand what are some of those intangible benefits that we didn't understand before. And so a good example of that is our commitment around greenhouse gas emissions in our palm supply chain. And so I think we all know that deforestation directly impacts climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. And we know that by buying certified sustainable palm, we are better protecting the forest and there's a benefit to climate. But we've had a difficult time quantifying that and bringing all those pieces together. And the ROSI model helped us do that in a way that was very replicable and easy to understand. Another good example of that is around employee turnover and productivity, which Sophie mentioned earlier. But another piece that we track in different pockets of the company, but we're not able to bring together. And so through this approach, it helped paint a much broader and comprehensive vision for where those benefits are accruing and how do we start to quantify that. The second benefit that we saw was really around optimizing our sustainability strategies. And so at a really high level, our sustainability benefits really fell into two big buckets, right? There's this risk mitigation piece around our efforts, and then there's a growth opportunity as well. And so by being able to quantify and build this model out for palm and soy sustainability, it helps us start to be able to say, are these the right investments to be able to drive progress and drive benefit as fast as we can? Or are there areas that we should be looking at refining over time? And so the model gives us the ability to do that in a way that we weren't able to do before. In line with that is really helping us be able to scenario plan. So if we were to accelerate our efforts, build a different partnership in this space, really focus on one specific strategy, would we be able to accelerate our efforts? And would that also not only accelerate our environmental outcomes, but also accelerate the benefit and the value that it brings to Cargill and our partners? And so those two pieces really help us start to think about what can we do differently and what can we do better. The fourth benefit that was really helpful for us was really being able to quantify and then track the benefits, right? And so it's one thing to be able to build a business case and quantify the value of sustainability once, but to be able to continually track against that to validate the model or refine the model, which ultimately helps us prove our sustainability strategies. And so this helps us identify where we have gaps in tracking, but also where we can really focus on tracking that's going really well. And so as we think about how we report out internally and also with our partners, it creates a framework for us to be able to share better data in a way that's more meaningful for our internal processes, but also for our partners where we work on sustainability resources. And then the final piece, which was really exciting for us, is that by going through the process, we've really been able to identify opportunities we hadn't thought about in the innovation space. And so as we're going through the ROSI process, it helped us start to think about things a little bit differently. And the partnership with NYU and their existing research and expertise really helped bring new thought leadership to some of the work that we've been doing. And so it helps us start to think about why have we always done this strategy this way, or why is the whole industry going in this space? And is there an opportunity to really innovate in this space? Because we think the value is probably much greater than we initially thought. And so that's been a really exciting piece that we unexpectedly found coming out of this process that creates a really long list of projects and programs that we'll be digging into this year. So that was a lot of benefits really quickly. I'm happy to pause and turn it back over to Sophie for questions. Otherwise, I can also dig into a couple of those pieces in more detail as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Ty. I was just getting off mute and coming back on video. Thank you so much. A really helpful and just fantastic, overview of both Cargill, your commitments in the sustainability space, and thank you so much for your partnership on the ROSI work. We have a lot of great questions that have come in. Ty, what I might do is you can start exploring some of them because some are Cargill specific. But while you're doing that, because I've had a chance to be screening them, I'm going to take one from Allison Stouse, who asked, does ROSI have the capability to quantify benefits related to biodiversity or other environmental co-benefits beyond climate GHG emissions reduction? So the answer is yes. So ROSI is very much a flexible framework and methodology. So I like to often say that the way that sort of we approach a project and the methodology, how we think about benefits, that's, that's the more sort of fixed component of ROSI, but each project is really an exploration with the company in uncovering what it is you want to explore and what the benefits are from that. To answer your question a bit more specifically, Allison, ROSI is really focused on measuring internal benefit back to the company. So based on your question, what I'm inferring is, if there was something related to your company's strategy around biodiversity, there was something that you were doing and changing your supply chain practices to enhance or protect biodiversity, for example, we would be wanting to understand what are those different practices, what is business as usual? What are you changing? What's changing as a result of this work? And then apply the benefit lens from there. ROSI really isn't a tool to look at the external impact measurement. There's a lot of great people doing work in that space. It's really fairly unique in looking at the value back to the company. So how might protecting biodiversity help to reduce risk in your supply chain? Is it helping you get a better quality of crop at the end of the day, right? These are just some of the ways that I could think about a ROSI project linked to that. So hope that helps, and thanks for the question.
So looking at the questions, there's one for Cargill around how will Cargill track their progress on these goals from 2021 to 2030? And so there's a couple ways we track our goals. We obviously have a lot of internal systems, right, that help us be able to measure and quantify progress against our commitments. And that'll look differently depending on the commitment and the scope of where that sits, right? So for our processing plants, that's a different system than our scope 3 commitments that's in our supply chain. And so lots of internal reporting capabilities, dashboards, and ways to keep us on track and also identify where we're falling behind. We also report out externally depending on the commitment, right? So for climate change, we report through CDP, we report through SBTI. And so making sure that there's a level of transparency in our commitments and our progress is really important. And so we share that and align with the industry standard reporting mechanisms for each specific commitment. And I'll say what's helpful about the ROSI model in our reporting is that we've always traditionally just really reported against each specific goal's environmental impact, which is obviously critical and a huge piece of the commitments that we've made, but it's not the full picture of what we're doing. And so by having the ROSI model, it helps us expand our thinking to those intangible benefits and the financial benefits and really building the business case for sustainability, which in turn helps accelerate our progress. And so with the ROSI model and the work that we've done, it's going to change some of our reporting systems so that we're starting to look at here's our commitment, here's our environmental strategies, here's how we're doing, and here's the benefit that brings to us. And as we partner with other organizations, the benefit that it brings them to. And what we expect is this is really a flywheel that will just help accelerate our efforts, right? So as we progress in our sustainability commitments, we'll see the benefits start to progress too, which really just justifies an acceleration of our work, right? And continues that whole cycle.
Great. Thank you, Ty. So I'll take another one while you scan through for some others, Ty. So I'm seeing a couple of great questions around ROSI and diversity, equity, inclusion work or social sustainability. So I'm going to kind of group a couple of them together. So the answer is that yes, I mean, ROSI is really a framework that can help a company assess a business case or an ROI, again, applying trying to put something a little more quantitative on something that is qualitative for a number and a broad set of sustainability topics. We use the broad definition of sustainability. What I will say, so a couple of things. First, I'll just say at the center, our view is that not everything needs a business case. There will certainly be things that companies pursue that just make sense and just are core to their purpose and values, and we fully support that. Really, the goal of ROSI, though, is to say there's so much value that is yet to be unlocked linked to sustainability. And so we want to be part of the conversation in helping to show your CFO, your controller, your treasurer, your investors, other key stakeholders that this work has value and has meaning and is important to the bottom line as well. So I just wanted to make that point as well. On the diversity, equity, inclusion, or other types of social focused sustainability issues, we're very open and excited and interested in exploring ROSI collaborations to build out our framework and thinking on that topic. I see a question around ROSI quantifying social impact. This participant works in advertising, and they've just declared not to work for fossil fuel companies. Just off the top of my head, I think that'd be a really interesting thing to apply ROSI to. What comes to mind is, how does that, in making that commitment as you track it over time, are you increasing customer loyalty with your existing customers? Are you bringing in new business as a result of that stance? Are you attracting a different type of employee as a result of taking a stand and sort of changing the purpose orientation of your company as well? So just to name a few ways that I would think about building and thinking about the benefits of a commitment like that. And so then for others that were asking about diversity, equity, inclusion, to date we haven't done a ROSI project. Our center's 5 years old. We've been doing ROSI for 3.5, 4 years. Very interested in that, and so look forward to kind of maybe having some conversations afterwards around ideas that people have around the business case, if you will, for these sort of how these efforts are helping companies to see value in parts of the business that they maybe haven't thought of before. So thanks to all for asking those great questions.
So it looks like there's a question around, does Cargill have a measurable definition of regenerative agriculture and a quantitative baseline for participating farmers? And we do. So our commitment is around 10 million acres of regenerative agriculture. And so that's one of the biggest metrics that we track, is the adoption of different conservation practices that fall under that regenerative ag bucket that would count towards that commitment. We have lots of other metrics behind it, but we're mostly focused on the outcomes that regenerative agriculture can bring that help support our other commitments, right? So the carbon benefit or the greenhouse gas benefit of those different conservation practices, or the water quality benefits that those different conservation practices can benefit. And so really regenerative agriculture as a mechanism or as a pathway to help us achieve our other commitments. And we don't have a formal definition around regenerative agriculture, as that's still an evolving term, right? And it means different things to different people. But for us, it's really about having the flexibility in partnering with our farmers to choose the conservation practices that make the most sense for their farm, right? So instead of dictating cover crops for everyone or a type of tillage, right, it's really about going field by field or farm by farm, what works for that farm in a way that's going to help improve their farmer livelihoods, improve the viability of their farm long term, in a way that's going to deliver against some of the environmental outcomes that we have commitments against. And so, of course, as that terminology continues to evolve, and hopefully there will be more guidance around a formal definition and different practices and the environmental outcomes associated with those practices, right, will continue to evolve too, but that's where we are today.
Great. I see a question around in terms of benefit calculations, like savings from turnover. Does the business accept this into ROI calculations as quote concrete data, like they do component costs, capital investments, et cetera? That's a great question. I'll start, and then Ty, if you have anything to add from kind of the real life project experience, I'll turn it to you. So we have a requirement, if you will, in a ROSI project that finance be involved and have a seat at the table. And it's in part kind of connected to the question. We think our goal is that this work and this analysis is accepted by the business, and that becomes part of how decisions get made, other types of planning processes. And so it's very important that finance be involved in the creation of the model, the creation of the tool, verifying key assumptions, verifying inputs, because otherwise, as the question implies, the implication is that sort of the end of the day, if it's not accepted, then it's not seen as robust and credible. So, one of our lead researchers on this project is a former CFO. And so we certainly think that we bring credibility coming from a business school and having key researcher background on our team who can speak that finance language as well. So that's a large, I think, also unique nature of these projects, is that we are really trying to encourage and bring together finance, sustainability, risk, sales, and marketing, right, to make this really a cross-functional engagement as well. Ty, not sure if you'd like to add anything else there.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I'll just add that's such a critical piece of applying the model, because in the end, if you don't use it right, it's not as valuable. And so for us, having the credibility and the expertise that NYU brought to us really helped us bring all the different stakeholders together in a little bit different way than if it was just me as the sustainability person working on a model. And I think what's really important about that is traditionally in the past, sustainability can be kind of this standalone team within an organization, right? Like you have very robust sales and marketing teams, operations teams, supply chains, right? Very traditional business units or functions that have very straightforward ways of measuring costs and value. And then on the side, you have sustainability, right? And it's not fully integrated into the business sometimes. And that has enabled some progress, but to truly scale and meet the commitments that we all have a responsibility in doing, sustainability has to be embedded into the business. And that means kind of speaking the same language as those other functions. And ROSI helps bring those pieces together and helps us speak that language in a way that's very easily understood and very credible. So as we think about making investments or accelerating our work, we're really comparing apples to apples between different projects. And so it's not this side project anymore. It's really central to the business and where we're trying to go. And I would argue that's where sustainability needs to evolve to for us to meet the challenges that we all face. So looking at more questions, there's a question around how do you believe ROSI has helped make a stronger case for Cargill to adopt practices that are sustainable, but also commercially viable? So I think that's been a big piece of the project in and of itself. We inherently know, or at least I assume if you're joining this webinar, you inherently know that being more sustainable is good for business, but we haven't been able to make a strong business case without the ROSI model. And so having that has really been able to create the foundation for us to be able to do that. And coming out of the work, we've identified 3 to 4 really big opportunities that if we just accelerate our efforts, right, we're also accelerating the benefits that we're going to see. And so we went into it knowing or or thinking that there would obviously be a lot of value in sustainability, but I think the results were much greater than we had anticipated and uncovered even some short-term opportunities that if we were to really accelerate our efforts, right, it would not only accelerate our progress against our commitments, but also the value that it brought to our business.
Great. I see a couple of questions about data, and I'm going to kind of combine some of them. So one around data used to quantify intangible benefits sourced from within the company. If we set up monitoring arrangements to measure more benefits for future. And then another one around how can companies leverage digital technologies to use the ROSI methodology. So I'll answer that first question kind of generally across projects. In terms of data sources, it's a combination. If we're looking at a ROSI project where it's looking backwards, and the cases that I shared, most of them were a company's had a project or program in place for a number of years and wants to understand what the ROI of that work has been so far. So there, hopefully, data exists and we're aggregating that and using that to conduct a monetization. Certainly, there are assumptions, probabilities in ROSI models. There's that in financial modeling too. So certainly, though, when we're looking at a new program or something that hasn't been started yet and projecting out, there's obviously it's more based on, assumptions there as well. But I think that in the absence of that, we're also using academic studies. I know in Cargill project, obviously a lot of USDA data, right? There's a lot of core data sets that were available to the team as well. So it kind of depends on what we're examining and looking at. To the question around digital technologies, I'll be transparent. I think the data components of these projects are often the hardest and the most time consuming. So if anyone out there has a great solution to solve how to get data out of companies related to when things are intangible or sitting in different parts of the business, very much that's I think sort of something we're very interested in. I think a ideal state would be that a lot of this would be more automated, and so I think that opportunities to figure out how to integrate this into key company dashboards and the key metrics the company is looking at are something that we're very we think would make a lot of sense and something that's very smart for companies to explore as well.
I'll just add the project has helped us identify where we need better systems for data, right? And where it was difficult to gather data and where we have really good data. And so that's been a good takeaway from the project too, is it helped us be able to look at where can we improve some of our data pieces as well. So looking at the questions, there's a handful of questions just around Cargill's specific sustainability initiatives and reporting, and if we're using blockchain and some of these other technologies. I'll just add that I don't think we'll have time for me to get into all the different specific pieces of our sustainability work, but our website has a lot of good information around where we are using blockchain, what we're thinking about for climate change and future commitments. And I'll just add that part of why we wanted to use the ROSI model is as we think about, right, we have our 2030 commitments, but as we think about what's next, right, what's the next commitment, where do we need to focus more on? The ROSI model creates a methodology to help us do that and evaluate really the business case of doing that and making new commitments and new strategies and helping us build that out. And I would say in the past, that's been a key piece that we've been missing. And so I don't know if there are other sustainability practitioners from the private sector on the call, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with you have your sustainability strategy, and this is a roadmap to meet your 2030 commitments, and you understand the investments and the partnerships and the tools to get there. And then the obvious question is, well, what's the business case for this? and how can we compare that against the suite of other priorities that a company has. And so having this model and this methodology allows us to be able to have that conversation when we start planning for what's next. How do we evaluate new technologies to accelerate our progress? How do we make new commitments? How do we change existing strategies, right? And this is a key piece of that decision-making process.
Great, thanks, Ty. So a question around Rosie and thoughts with regard to public-private partnerships and addressing housing and further development of smart cities. It's a great question. I'm going to put chat in a response to direct you to a project that we're doing looking at New York City and applications for the Sustainable Development Goals. Rosie, I think, will become a component of that. But again, certainly there's a lot of application for Rosie. I think that, very interested in the real estate industry, and any ways that companies are thinking about making key investments in sustainability and helping to map the business case for that is something I'm very much looking forward to looking into as well. So I think with that, we're basically at time. Peter, I'm going to bring you back in for just a final wrap up. But Ty, thank you so much again for joining us, for your partnership and great remarks. Thanks to everyone for the fantastic questions and dialogue, and appreciate everyone tuning in today.
Great. Thanks, Sophie. And yes, everyone, please join me in thanking our panelists, Sophie and Ty, once again. I think this was a terrific snapshot of the ROSI method, and one that will hopefully drive action from the attendees here today. I think it's so encouraging how many both direct and indirect benefits there are to quantify in terms of sustainability efforts. It might feel a little daunting at times, but the ROSI method is clearly a right step towards that direction. And both presentations highlighted that so well. So thank you again. We encourage you to stay tuned to the work of the Chamber Foundation, NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business, and of course, Cargill's work in the sustainable agriculture space. Educational events such as these are the core of our program, and I know my partner organizations here today have great pipelines of regular content as well. So please stay tuned to our social channels, newsletters, etc. And lastly, thank you to all the attendees here today for tuning in, your spirited questions, and for learning alongside us. You all truly make these programs go. So thank you again. And with that, we hope this was an inspiring chat for you all. We hope you have a great rest of your day and hope to see you again at future events. Thanks so much.